what are some of the ways to cultivate and nurture innovation within organization?
I don't think companies are incentivized or built to really innovate. Really what they want to do is find one solution, scale it, and lock people in and keep doing the same thing. So they actually think they're almost anti-innovation for the most part, generally, especially in a big company. Where I really am proud of doing this was in Google Research. I joined basically before anyone thought it made any sense for designers to be working on AI. Their original idea was they wanted us to build nice looking demos of the research they were doing. And we were like, no, actually what we're going to do is look at your technology, we generate a bunch of ideas that match that to actual uses for real people. This format, I think, is deceptively simple, but I think really critical. So everything is going to become the same. It's like when you mix paint and you mix all the colors together, you get brown or black or gray. You're going to have new original input.
Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Product Craft. Today's conversation is with Andy Dahley, a seasoned design and technology leader who's led innovation at companies like Google, Meta, Hewlett Packard, and even worked within the US government, including the Office of the President. We had a really engaging discussion about Andy's career journey, his perspective on the fast-changing design landscape, and what it actually takes to create and implement innovative products. He even broke down a step-by-step framework for bringing bold ideas to life and how to pitch them to executive leadership. We also talked about working at innovation-driven companies versus navigating the complexity of large bureaucratic organizations. If you're enjoying this content, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. This channel is still in early days, and your feedback and support really means a lot. Enjoy. Hi, Andy. Welcome to Product Craft.
Hey, thanks for having me.
When I was thinking about starting this podcast, I wanted to talk with people who've dedicated their life to the craft of making products. You are a technology design veteran with over 20 years of experience. You worked at Google, Meta, Hewlett Packard, with an array of innovative AI startups, including serving as VP of design at health tech startup 7Meet. Also, you had experience more recently working with the United States government directly in the executive office of the President of the United States, which is a very, I'm sure, interesting experience.
Especially lately, yeah.
To kick us off, how did you get on the path of being a designer?
Oh, it's funny. We'll go all the way back there. Yeah. Let's see. When I was in high school, I didn't know anything about industrial design or design. There was no web at that time to really date myself. But I wanted to be an architect, and I was pretty sure that's what I wanted to do. And then as I was headed to college, meeting with the counselors and influencing my parents, they were like a little nervous about design or architecture. And they're like, well, why don't you get a mechanical engineering degree first? And then you can do your architecture degree, and you can do it all in about the same time. So kind of bought into that. So I started as a mechanical engineer at the University of Michigan in my freshman year. And I was just really frustrated with it. It's all the basic core classes, right? Nothing was applied. I was really hands-on. And then I got introduced to industrial design first in the art school, finding out about it. And I very quickly switched and realized that was the thing for me. So I studied industrial design first. And then that was a ton of great fun and work. And I even worked as an industrial designer for a year after. But while I was there was right around Netscape 1.0 era, like my third year of school. And I started working with websites. And then I actually, as I was about to graduate, I made a portfolio online. And at that time, it was kind of weird I was literally one of the few industrial designers with a portfolio on the web. I was at, if you remember, Core, you remember Core? That's still at Core ID? It's really ID Magazine Journal. Like if you would type industrial design in, it was Lycos or Alta Vista at that time, I would come up first at that time. That's how it was.
Wow.
But when I went out to Palo Alto interviewing with design firms, they didn't even have web browsers, some of them, so they couldn't look at it online. So it was kind of funny. But that basically was trying to do that back then got me doing things interface wise and into that. And after working as an industrial designer for a year, I ended up being, it was kind of not as, and I was not as enthused to do that. And I was even working on interfaces for appliances and things like that. So I ended up being the guy already who could prototype those and doing that stuff. And then I joined a web design firm and did that for a year or almost a couple of years. And that's kind of where I really got into interaction design, UX. Not too long after that, I went to the media lab at MIT. Like I got in and left there, went to Boston, and that was just an amazing experience. 3 years there, like multidisciplinary, working with people, engineers, learning circuit design, learning to really program, and did that. And then after that, I moved out to the Bay Area, and that's really when I started as an interaction designer. I think I started out here at Philips and kind of went from there. So there was really no formal UX training at that time. And I think, but I think a lot of that real background, I think from industrial design, there's a lot of industrial designers moving. I feel like that spatial thinking, that really problem solving, really, I really like that you're focused on crafts. Like craftsmanship was key. The industrial design courses, they would have these weeder courses, so courses to get people out weren't serious. So that's some hard one. Like we were actually doing drafting still at that time on paper. And I remember having to do a first time where with a lead pencil, T-square, triangle, we'd have to do a whole 18 by 24 piece of paper. We'd have to draw lines horizontally as close as you can down the entire sheet of paper. Then you have to do it vertical. And the idea of it, it's kind of like, to me, it's like akin to that Karate Kid, paint the fence, sand. Like they were really, and some people would just hate that and get out of it. But I think after that, we could do anything. Like it's just that discipline and that precision is like really reinforces a lot.
I think it's a great maybe time to explore a little bit kind of how the industry is changing with the AI and now with the tools that are available. Pretty much it's more accessible for a lot more people to write code or do design, or do more or less anything related to product development, right? So how do you feel how do you feel about this change, the rapid change that is happening in the industry with sort of augmentation of AI and what kind of opportunities it enables?
Oh man. Well, imagine the jump from desktop applications to web applications, right? And I think when we first designed the web applications, they were kind of cookie cutter. They tried redundant. We tried to make them, we use what we knew from desktop applications, and they've evolved since then, but they had to be rebuilt. And I think the same thing in this time is going to happen with software overall. Like we have these first AI software where chat applications, right? We have LLMs and you chat with them, and then you have to do everything else somewhere else. And now everybody's talking about agentic and having agents do things for you. So I think the software is going to be very different. Right now we'll have applications where we do this kind of bolt on of an AI chat on the side of an application. And I think there's going to be less user interface. There's going to be more directing the software, asking for things. But I think it's got to be more integrated in the product than just be a chat on the side. And I think for that matter, actually, there's going to be software that I think we're going to move to era where software is generated on the fly for you. Like instead of I want something to happen and someone writes an application to do that, instead, I'll just ask the computer, it'll write the application it needs, it'll do the work, and it'll kind of go away. So it's like it's just going to change so much of the way we work. And I think that has huge ramifications on what we're designing for and what designers do. I think there will be a need, but I think it's definitely, it's quite different, and everyone's going to have to adapt as designers from the way we do UX work now.
I was going to ask, like technically it could, like you described both approaches. One is currently we have like a separate chat app where we go in and interact with AI. Then there is another more like embedded approach where AI is integrated like inside of the products, right? Like it's almost like I wonder, yeah, like which is it? Do you see that both are going to be sort of retained, or is it moving more towards one or the other?
Well, anytime we have any new thing, like when phones came along, we didn't get rid of computers, or when tablets came along, we have both. So I think both will be there. It's how much we use of each. There might be, it's not like it's going to go away that will have the other interface. But I think, there will be different, it'll still be there. I do think there will be some change. I do think some things. I guess I'm saying, I think the chat is nice, but it's not a solution. I think
What's
I
what's
have,
wrong with it? What's wrong with the chat? Like, why is it like it's because I was thinking about it. Like, on one hand, chat is such a simple medium that basically everybody understands, right? Like everybody can send an SMS message, and because of its this familiarity, it essentially enables anybody to interact with AI as opposed to like a more specialized tool. But I did
yeah,
hear the notion that some people say like, well, it's just a chat, like it's not, it's not that great. Something must be better. But on the flip side, it's kind of chat in the sense there is no UI per se, right? And it's almost like the smarter the system becomes, maybe it will be just doing a lot more. So it's almost like,
I think imagine if you could only, I text is great. I think, chat is going to be there. A great example, chat GPT, like here's the case for design, like it existed, the model and the word way before the chat interface, they had that model for a year and no one was
Mhm.
excited about it. And when someone wrapped it in a chat and the way to use it is boom, then it exploded. That was the magic combination, right? In this framework. So, and it's very powerful and very useful and it's not going to go away. Like it's just step one. It's the same way, like when I'll go back, like computers were command line, right? And very hard to use and nobody used them. Then GUIs came along, graphical user interface, mouse, keyboard, Macs, and then it became a lot more accessible. Some would also argue even that was so good and so easy, that even limited things for a while. Like, so nobody jumped beyond GUIs for a long time and advanced
Mhm.
because it was good enough. I think that's kind of where we are with LLMs. Everyone's using them and thinks it's good. Um, and
Do you have
I have more, some of the problem, I think some of the problems is just the limitation of it. You need it to do more things. So you need it actually to take actions for you versus giving you, um, just talking to it. Like if the only way we could interact was texting each other, that wouldn't be it.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
I'm kind of curious. Have you thought about some potential new like patterns of interaction or like UI models that it may be kind of shifting to? Like, for example, something that I've just thought about kind of, and maybe it already exists, but like modular, kind of like almost UI that personalize as you use the software. Like, for example, you start with a starting point and let's say you start with a chat, but all of the sudden, as you interact, like, the system recognizes that, well, now you're creating an image and all of a sudden the UI like adapts and becomes more suitable for creating an image. Then, maybe you start looking for tickets in airplane and like you do start to get like personalized UI kind of on the fly. I don't know, like, have
Yeah,
you
I
thought about
absolutely think
things
that's
like
going to
that?
happen. I remember
Yeah.
when we were talking about customizing software. Yeah, I think that absolutely adapting to you and learning and changing will be a huge thing. I really think of it as multimodal. I really think of it as, while I'm using an application, I think, well, number one, I think the AI should be able to use the applications. And then, that used to be a big, cool, now it's actually happening, right? So just the way I can use it, the AI should be able to use it. And so I can interact together. Um, I start to think it's even just about other inputs, right? Right now, if it could see me, if it could hear and see what I'm doing, if it had a lot more background about the world around it, if it had access to other things, if I can point to things on the screen and understands what I mean, that's a shortcut to communicating with it, right? You're like, no, like if it did a design and you're like, no, I wanted that to be red or this to be green, instead of having to chat out a whole thing and
Yeah.
go through a whole cycle. Um, yeah,
Have you,
so I think,
have you tried some of the latest prototyping tools like with AI? Like lovable or subframe. Then there's also V0, I think.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I haven't tried those specific ones, but I've played with a few. I found, I mean, I think this is starting to happen, but I think there's so much work to make them work well, and then and putting AI into specific situations that work.
Mhm.
One other fact I even want to jump back to is, so image generation is easier to talk about than the text part for a second. Like, I think, remember the days when Photoshop files were too big and you had to flatten them, and you couldn't have layers and you didn't have
Yeah,
vectors, and if someone flattened it and you need to make a change, you can't do it, right? You got to go back to the agency as the original source files. So to me, that's what we're doing with LLMs right now that are generating images. Like, I can't. So I think having
right.
something editable or two-way would, just that alone would be a dramatic difference. Like I'm really excited to find more vector tools, right? Because it's a lot easier to edit a vector than it is pixels to change what you
Or
want.
even tools like, yeah, that's in my experience so far. And I can't say that I went too deep, but I'm sensing that there is a lack of precision and control. Like it's very easy. Like I took a course on Midjourney at some point, like I don't know, maybe about a year ago, and I did learn that there is actually a whole way that you can, if you learn how to prompt it in the right way, there's like some things that are completely unintuitive. Like for
Yeah,
example,
totally.
repeating the same word multiple times like increases the weight of that phrase, and then that like there is, or put in like a semicolon there, and like they're not,
Yeah.
they're
And that, I
completely
think
not.
those things will all get better. I do think
Yeah,
I mean, right, everyone's super into prompting right now. I think that'll get easier, but it can never read your mind, right? Just like another person can, right? Like you've worked with junior designers too. You know how hard it is when you know what you
yeah,
want and you can't communicate it to them. I think it's equivalent to that.
yeah.
I think about feedback loops. Like I think are really important. Like I really like what you were talking about UIs adapting to you, because I think about it
Mhm.
in the most general way of the loop of like, I ask for something, I get something, I say I want to adjust it. It learns how to understand you better. It learns what you really want. I call those the feedback loops that it learns for this current situation, but it learns sort of rapport in general of what you want or what you're trying to do. So I think, and these AIs are tremendous at that, like having that layer of them. Right now, they don't do that, right? You have a model, it's built, and it doesn't incorporate there's some parts, the RAG and some of these other technologies, but more and more of that will happen. And like like a lot, I've heard this before, and I think it's really true. It's like, this is the worst these are ever going to be. They're going to keep getting better, but I'm not talking about the AI. And now I think there will be other things beyond LLM, which I don't know. And if we should go to that level, there's just a lot of other ways to use AI. That's one piece. Because I'm really concerned about just the junkification of data, right? Like these are prediction engines, right? So they literally just predict the next word, or they
Mhm.
predict the next pixel. And if they start just looking at their own images that they generate over time, they degrade. So everything is going to become the same. It's like when you mix paint and you mix all the colors together, you get brown or black or gray. You're going to have new original input, and instead of just prediction. So I think that's why I always have faith. We need people doing things. We need new data. There's not enough new learning data out
Yeah,
there. So
100%. Like the crazy part is that I was just talking about it with my friend. Things are already the same. Like if you look
yeah,
across the
totally.
board in
Yeah.
product design, it already is so much more standardized than it used
Yeah.
to be. And it's, on one hand, it's great, but then there's also downsides. So it's already fairly standard, and like
Yeah.
probably because companies don't want to risk too much, right? Like somebody coming
Yeah.
out with a completely new uh
I mean,
interaction patterns, like, oh, what if it
yeah.
doesn't work?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple good, I do think that there are some really good standards and things that make sense, but that's on the architecture, not necessarily the look. And I do think designers have always copied each other. There have been a few innovators, but I agree. Everything has kind of, especially in products and they have really narrowed down the one, maybe a little too much. And I do think we'll have more of that. I'm even more worried about that in the even more creative parts of it. Like, um, like graphics and visual and that sort of thing. But I agree. Yeah, I do think we'll have more of that. And the problem is when you feed back in the more generic things, they actually end up degrading over time.
I know that innovation overall is a big theme for you. What are some of the ways to cultivate and like nurture innovation within organization? Because on one hand, always, there is a tendency to do things, as fast as possible. Let's just get it done, and kind of that's the familiar path. Now, how do you inject opportunities for innovation?
Well, I'll start a little high level, and I feel like then I almost want to like make sure you remind me we come back to like
Yeah.
innovate, because I actually think it's a really important thing. Like technology is aggregated. Years back when I came out here, there was a bunch of smaller companies. There wasn't this FANG, a couple giant companies, and I don't think companies are incentivized or built to really innovate. Really, what they want to do is find one solution, scale it, and lock people in, and keep doing the same thing. So they actually think they're almost anti-innovation for the most part, generally. So it's very. I'm just the reason to put that frame around things. It's generally very hard, I think, especially in a big company. I think it's also hard in venture. I don't think venture is a great place either, because they also want to do one thing, maybe innovate on figuring out what that is, and then you scale it. And but no, that being said, let's see. I think, I think where I really am proud of doing this was in Google research.
Mm.
I joined basically before ChatGPT, before anyone thought it made any sense for designers to be working on AI. I joined research, and we worked on image technologies, and there was so much amazing R&D work happening in research, like there is in a lot of companies, and it was very difficult to get it out into products, right? It's a lot easier for Google to spend a couple more cents and get more money from ads and do the same thing. And people on those teams don't want to spend time with research and innovate. So we set up a team, a very small team, a couple of us designers and engineers, hybrid team. And we talked to all of the researchers. And what we did, instead of just doing demos for them, their original idea they wanted us to build nice looking demos of the research they were doing. And we were like, no, actually what we're going to do is look at your technology. We'll generate a bunch of ideas that match that to actual uses for real people, an example, and we're going to prototype those quickly. So I have a whole process that I don't know if we have enough time in a podcast to go so far, but I think doing that and generating a bunch of those ideas and have an open process where you show those to folks. I created this. I'm really
What are the high level? What are the high level points of the process?
I think the most important thing is this, like, understand what your capabilities are, what's possible to do. And then I think this is the heart where you've made a lot of creative, done generating ideas, even the like one-liners of text of what hundreds, thousands. This is where that like discipline it's a lot of work to generate a lot of ideas. Most people, almost everyone, I think, is in the world jumps to like the first idea they have instead of forcing their brain to go into that hard thinking about generating new ideas and more. So generate a bunch of those. And then after doing that, you kind of have your kind of set of criteria to evaluate them. There's a lot of different ways to evaluate, and then basically get it down to some that really makes sense. Then you build out posters. This format, I think, is deceptively simple, but I think really critical. This sort of basically you take these ideas of application and you do a single page with a very explanatory title, a small bit of text, and then maybe an image or a set of images or animation that explains this very focused idea. And so then when you have 50 of those, it's a really powerful tool, whether they're right or not. You don't go too far, but then you can go back to the team and talk about can this work? Is this feasible? What are the other ideas does this generate? And when I've done these so I also did this at Meta and Facebook research. I kind of repeated this process and did it again. And like getting to do a process over and having it successful twice is pretty amazing. But so designers that do the discipline of these posters, we got better at it. And your thinking gets better on how to be focused, how to have an idea, be concrete about what it is, how to think, how to iterate, how to communicate it well to other people. Because also in a big company, people don't have time for your ideas. They don't
So
look
it's
at them.
essentially
Yeah.
essentially like creating kind of a pitch slide, like a single slide to sort of advertise. Like, what if that thing was published on the marketing website? Kind of.
Yeah, I
Is
think that's an
that right?
example similar to the way Jake Knapp with Sprint, that idea of like the website for your product. It's like that. These are more, these are even almost they're features almost more than full products, because you can do more of them. It's all about not investing time. Like if I spend 2 months on one idea, I do this in a day or two, right? So less time means you can do more things, try more things. And then they're in a format that's very fast to share to people. So people will look at them, and then you can get that feedback and discussion, which actually creates more ideas. And then you can do a lot of evaluating. Then to me, then the next step is the prototyping and actually testing the good ones. You keep going down and picking things. And to me, that's this kind of new product innovation and this method. And it's worked really well. So example, Google's Magic Eraser was actually from my team. And it was even originally my one pager, my concept of coming up with the idea of what if on your phone, you could move things around and adjust your photos easily. And I had left, but that was an early concept, and it didn't instantly hit. I think this is the other important thing in innovation. It's not always instant, but a year or two later, Super Bowl commercial for Google is Magic Eraser on Pixel phones. So I think that's one of the most concrete outputs of that.
This is incredible. I actually did not expect that it would be possible to provide with a concrete, method for such a broad question. But that is why, honestly, I love doing this. Let me try to recap it really quick. So you spend time first with engineers to understand the capabilities of
Really,
technology, right?
researchers, but sure,
Researchers.
engineer, technical, depends on.
Okay.
Yes, understand the capabilities. Let's call it that. Right.
People who understand the capabilities of the
Yeah.
technology. Then
What do we
you
have as
take,
a possibility? Yeah.
yeah, you take those outputs, then you work with your team, like probably a small group to generate all sorts of possibilities of how this can be used. You pick
Yeah.
the best ones, you create kind of slides, posters to pitch each of those ideas. And then do you organize a meeting or do you send it out?
I don't think
Just
there's any
out?
one way. It depends. I mean, it's definitely put together in a deck. You definitely want to be talking to people. You definitely don't do a single presentation. One other important part is it's not just generating off the technology tech push. It's also understanding who would the user that you're trying to go after, or what are possible users. Like it's technology and application of it together on each of the posters, right? Is an important piece. I think, there's a core team that you're working with to do whatever projects you're doing. So that's where you're working very closely. You're reviewing these ideas, and you'll probably generate a bunch more posters and a bunch of ideas from what you come out of, right? And you'll zoom in. The idea of this is you've accelerated ahead because you're kind of talking to them about feasibility. You're like, no, that's not good. Or, oh, that sparked something different. Or we realize you'll get into, oh, this was the part that's hard about what you're doing. This is the part that's easy technically. You get into a lot of details there.
How do you frame? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just one other part I glossed over before is I set a set of criteria for evaluating the ideas that you are transparent with your team. Like for Photo Lab, we had like 5. And an example of the kind of criteria, one of them for us was like virality, like, if someone shares, if it's shareable, will more people use it. One was how much of our tech does it use? You set a criteria, very basic, and then you rate each of your concepts on those 5-ish criteria, like 1 to 5, and then you add up the score. And we didn't just set these ourselves. The discussion around those ratings with the people in your team, is really, that discussion is even more important than the end score, right? And like I'm valued because it like sets everybody's expectation and understanding of the scoring, and the good idea rise to the top really quick, and it's clear and it's more objective than someone just saying, I like that idea,
Yeah. So what are some, I mean, you said some of the criteria. It's actually also another very important thing. Like you mentioned virality. What are the kind of go-to top criteria that you typically use?
I mean, to me, this is another thing that's really important for experience. I think, well, I'll use it for, so Photolab was using photo technologies, and I'll give you them. The ones we decided to use for that was, how hard is it to build? Development effort. Like that. I think that's always a go-to one. Like, if it's going to take you 20 years, that's worse than if I can do it in a day. Right. Does it use our technology? How valuable is it to the user? Like, how valuable a solution? The viral, and then we leave one. I think it's really important. The wild card is we leave coolness was the idea of, like, just, to have a little bit of something else. So that's an example. I think you shouldn't have more than 5. They have to be pretty simple. You can change them and then re-rate your products, but even that exercise of is almost better to me than a PRD or a set of requirements. Because when your team aligns on what is important there, it's almost a way to really get the value. What is important to us? From experience, when I've seen a process used by folks where they're not as disciplined about the criteria, that it's not worked as well. Like, they've not, but I think, any criteria better than none. And I think there's a lot of experience in tuning those.
How long can it take between, you spend time with people to understand the capabilities of the technology to that meeting, to that first meeting when you start to already like pitch it? Is it,
I mean, it should be as fast as you can. I mean, I think it should be faster than you're comfortable.
What's realistic? Like, what's the good pace?
I mean, it depends on how many researchers. I'd say our time frame. I mean, I'd say I really wouldn't want it to take more than a month. Would be a good time. I think it would be a good. I mean, it depends on the level. I mean, this is a scalable process, right? Like, if it's a really when we were doing it with AI and complex stuff. I mean, we, in less than 3 months, we shipped 3 prototypes, launched in the App Store. So that's not only just picking the ideas, building the applications, and shipping them, and getting them through Google's launch process, which is more challenging than we imagined. So I think it's not like a instant process. Like, you can do it a few times, you keep doing it, you evolve. I think a month would be what you'd want to do, because I think time is never on your side. I think the faster you do it, the less risk. Like, time is money for real, literally. And so the less time you do, the more you can explore more radical ideas, the more innovation. If you take a long time to do something, everyone's risk averse and they're scared to experiment with things.
What should be the mindset of the people who present these posters, these pitches? Like, for example, how important is it to not be attached or not to have some favorites?
It's very important. I think you shouldn't at all. I mean, I think it's just like user research. Like, you should be just completely objective and listening to folks. I was just thinking, actually, I have done it in presentation. And I have sent them to people, and those are my least favorite. I mean, you send it and that's the last resort. You hope to be able to. I think it's better in discussions with a group of people with these ideas than it is in a presentation. Like, I really think that's more important. But I'm not against if at least as a starting point of presentation, or sending it to someone to get some entry or find something out. But I would emphasize that having it more of a discussion is more important. But I'm really glad you asked. I think you can't at all. I mean, that's what the criteria are helpful. You can't at all have a bias. So you have to really try to be. I think all design, that's one of the most important things, I think, in being a designer, is that object. I mean, you can have an intuition, you can feel, and you can try to, but you've got to get to, like, why do I think that's good, or why that works, not just stay in the.
Yeah, this is great advice. I think this is like a very practical thing. Let's talk a bit about prototyping as an important, as part of the process. I know you're into creating prototypes, rapid prototypes. Like, maybe tell a little bit about what kind of prototypes do you usually create, and in which situations?
Yeah, I mean, so I also I think I mean, I hate to keep defining every term we're talking, but when I think about prototyping, I think about it a little different than everyone else. Like in fact, even I think of those posters are already a prototype. I mean, to me, a prototype is, well, what are the purposes of a prototype first? It's either to refine or work out an idea, like get it going so you can feel it and try it. It's to generate new ideas from trying it out. Or there's to test or validate something like, oh, yep, that actually worked. To demonstrate it to someone else in a concrete form. And then the last was like minimize mistake at kind of the end of the process. We'd make a prototype of a car or something out of it. Like we make sure before we manufacture at scale, we figure it out. So, and I think prototypes are it's fastest, cheapest, easiest way you can try an idea. So so I think I hate to say, but a lot of people limit prototype to it's an interactive, clickable thing, and that to me that's one example of it. But for instance, if what you need to test on your products, everybody has the same login form, so maybe we don't have to rebuild that in our prototype. That's a really simplistic example. Prototype the hard pieces that you really need to test. So I think of all of your design as prototyping in my mind.
Yeah.
So I think the posters are my number one because when you're generating new products, you get the most. The next mocks for, if you're doing websites, Figma's your best friend. A lot of those. And then if it's really complicated interaction, it's time to, do a prototype.
I'm curious to get your take on, sometimes I kind of wonder about the level of fidelity of a prototype. And obviously there is a notion that, do it as fast as possible, show it to people, get feedback, like that is known. But then there's another aspect when, let's say you as a creator, as a designer, you have a hunch, you have your, intuition telling you about a particular, direction that may make sense. And you're like, you've been thinking about it for a long time. You think that it has potential, and then figuring out what is the right level of fidelity to capture it so that it has the best chance of actually being understood. Do you have sometimes this kind of concern, fear almost of like, this is really good. Now, if I'm going to show it like in this half-baked, super raw state, maybe people will not get it. So I actually need to polish it a little bit more. Like, is it part of insecurity, or maybe it's actually
No, it's not.
natural thing? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it goes back to those, why am I doing this prototype? Like, if it's just for me to figure something out, I don't think the fidelity is as important. I think everyone says they're okay looking at rough prototypes, and I think they aren't. Like, that's just simply not true. So I think it really depends. Like, if it's just a mechanism or one little thing, maybe it could be pretty rough, or it's just informal. But I think the part of fast is being fast at prototyping as high fidelity as you can, right? And there's some people who can make things beautiful, but it takes forever. So I think, to me, I think fortunately we have design systems. That's what they're for. And that makes it so much easier to build things faster, right? And now AI, we're going to do it even faster. It is really important to be as clear as possible. I mean, this is kind of the trick of the posters, because you're kind of showing them so they can understand the idea, but you're not letting people get bogged down in all the details or things that they would get stuck on or get confused on. But I do think fidelity is important, especially in that whenever it's to anyone else, whenever you're demonstrating it, unless you know, when I say know your audience, unless you really have worked with these people a long time, they're skilled and can get it. Otherwise, I think it's not. Like, if you have to sell this to these people and they have to understand it, and especially with users, I think this gets started, but even more with product managers.
Yeah, sometimes I try to I'm being selective about how and who I show certain things to, depending on the stage of, like, I may have, some group of people that I'm like, what, here's a super raw thing, like genuinely, am I crazy or does it make sense? But then depending on like when something starts to feel warm, like, there is something in it, then I may choose to dedicate more time to refine it. and then I kind of expand the circle that I presented to, kind of going more outward and outward, like collecting more of the different angles, perspective, refining that thing as we go, and then kind of is that similar to how you also approach it, or?
I mean, I think like I keep saying, like I keep Goldilocksing everything. I say that like a little. I do think you need to do it sooner than you're comfortable. Like maybe not with everyone though. For example, when I'm running design teams, I think I'm almost the opposite. I think we should be forced to share with each other very early. I think because also it's a safe space. If this isn't like you share an idea and they hate it, you don't have to necessarily fully take that. Oh, well, I know maybe I didn't communicate, maybe it wasn't clear. I think that's where it's important to show it early, because the problem, if it takes too long to do, you'll be too invested in it and you won't be ready to make changes, right? Or you don't have time to do 3 more concepts. So I think it's bad. Number one, I think it's within the design team should force people to share early and get used to
within design
feedback.
team. Yeah, for sure. I think within design team, like every day sharing more about outside, sharing with, product managers, executives.
I mean, you have to, I think you have to figure out the right level for your organization and the groups you're sharing with, and I think most do pretty good fidelity, but I also think you don't want to make people wait too long for something, like in that situation. I think then I would rather break it up, right? And I think if it takes too long, and I'm not sure, the project should have been broken up to smaller pieces so you could show them faster, at the right fidelity. So, but I think it's important not to, I don't like wireframes anymore for people. I don't think they work. I don't think we do products in a way like where that's as important. It's like, I think, we're efficient enough now to build those into a real fidelity. I'd rather show,
when you have, I'm sure you've had situations when you spend, a lot of time within a product and you came to a conclusion that it actually requires a substantial improvement, like not a small tweak here and there, but actually some foundational things had to be improved to really make like a bold, impactful change. Like, have you had those experiences?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the local maximum as we talk about it, right? Like you get it, everybody's optimized around something, and like you got to do a lot or change something much bigger, like to go out of it. I think Hangouts, Google Hangouts, now Google Meet, when I was running that, is a good example of that. Like the first version of it was, when I took it over and we started, it was like not in great shape. It's not like the modern apps we're working on now. And the team was running so fast, it was really risky. Like I felt like we needed time to dig in and really figure out how to overhaul this. Right. And it's because we were on like a weekly churn of things. So feature churn. So the team was cranky. So what we ended up doing, a little like, this is a real push with, so Google has this code freeze in the end of December, this period of time where they don't ship anything. So we had a break, like this opportunity from having to do things. So we actually did a sprint. We'd grab a team of people, we locked ourselves for a week when most people like chill out and relax. And we went to town, like at a very intense session on overhauling the whole thing and doing a big change. And that's actually where like the modern Google interface, like seamless. We have just a bunch of the cleaning up and getting things out of the way in Hangouts, right? Like just helping people understand it's about the conversation, not about all of these apps and these UI in front of you, and showing that to people and demo it. So to me, it's like, it's a little bit of, it's brute force and making time or room to dig that out. I think as a design leader, you've got to carve out a group to do that, or some team that can get away from the rush to do that.
My question, so it's great to hear that you've had, and you've described like a particular example when you had to deal with it. I'm curious, what is then the process to advocate for that change further on? Because sometimes what I experience is, as designers, we can create amazing concepts, we can create bold visions, like, we find the extra time to like reevaluate and improve. But then, like, we're not creating code. We're not shipping to productions. We're not, prioritizing necessarily everything. What is the pathway to help that vision then actually come to reality? Like, what are the steps that you went, maybe like in the case
Yeah.
with Hangouts
Yeah.
or any other example? Like, what was
Well,
your
I think
next
you
step?
have to have a champion, like a business leader champion, like someone who's buying it. It's kind of like Inception. You've got to make people know they want it, like convince them that this is important and critical. It should be aligned with the business usually. Like you've got to understand what the business needs. You can't, they've got to understand why it's valuable both to users and, to revenue or something like that. But I think the number one is getting a champion, the business owner that's going to back you, that wants you to do this. I think if you just build it out and then show it is the wrong way. I think you got to convince them that you need to do it before you do it, or at least don't go in it. So I definitely think there's just something about our lizard brains or persuading people that new ideas are scary, and if it's not their idea, they don't like it. So I really think having a champion who's like, oh my gosh, we definitely need to work on that. That's important. Having them involved or in that small set of stakeholders, and letting them see in. I think it really, a lot of people think I'll just go away and I'll figure it all out. But I really think you just can't do that because even if your idea was great, even if it's where you be, you just don't have that alignment with folks. It's really hard to get, especially in a big company with a lot of people. So I think
it's really important for stars to align, so to speak, for it to be the right idea, the right execution, the right champion. So it's sometimes it's not just about having a good design or a good idea. Like a lot of things have to come to perspective.
It's like what we were talking about. Like companies aren't innovative. I was a bold thing. I would say they definitely, just all the incentives are aligned to quarterly earnings and what are we doing and how can we bump it up? So that's risk, doing that. They don't quite see guaranteed success. We need as designers to be more in the leadership role, in that CEO role, and that running things.
Why do you think it's very rare for there to be truly design-led organizations?
I think, I think most companies as they scale, they always have this, if I oversimplify organization, to these triads of product, engineering, design. There's those three. And then lead it, as companies scale, you have that three group. And I've just noticed in most companies, the lead of those three is almost never the designers, the other two. Why is that? I think it's, there's a bias. So we're kind of the newer, design is the newer piece. I'm kind of making this up as I guess. I haven't answered. It's a really good question. So I think we're newer, and I think it's a little less concrete. I mean, the engineers have the technical, backing, there's kind of a creativity in area that we're kind of like the third leg, the kind of end of that stool generally. And I think I think designers in general have not been as good at understanding those other parts and really amping up. We should be better at business and running do a little more of that. And I think we aren't always that way. We aren't always running things in that way.
Yeah, a recurring. By the way, it's interesting. I had I think by the time this episode is going to air, I spoke to one of the former VPs of design at IBM, Doc Powell, and we kind of explored similar question, but so it's interesting. He brought this perspective that roles, leadership roles in design, such as VPs, like chief design officers, they are actually, as you also said, very new. He said, it's been 12 or something years, for those, for design to have those roles even established. Honestly, it's a recurring theme, and kind of the question is what is it that we designers are not doing, that we are kind of in this position? Everybody says design is very important. Everybody says experience is very important. Not a single person would say it's not. But then when it comes to in the reality, when it comes to prioritization and what are we going to prioritize to build, where are we going to allocate, resources and the team, Um, Probably designers don't have as much weight as we would wish, and I'm trying to see like what is it that uh, we may be missing
Well, let's
in
see.
that.
I think there's a ratio situation with like, there's definitely with engineers there. You need less designers than you need engineers, right? You can design a lot more things. So there's a ratio difference, right? So, and often people in leadership positions, to be a VP, you generally have a certain number of people, right? So if you just already have this ratio, designers are spread across more groups, right? So I think you have a thing. One reason I've even gotten less interested in some of these senior roles is design leaders end up being just resource managers, meaning they don't work on the product really. They're just allocating people to different groups because the designers are spread across orgs. And I think that's one thing. We've kind of put ourselves in this almost consulting group setup where, I've been, not that I don't mind managing group, but I find that less interesting. Just, you don't have as much impact on products at a senior level, if you're just allocating teams. So I think that's one thing we've done to ourselves. And I think a lot of groups have aggregated more in that direction. I
Yeah.
think that's a big factor.
So sometimes when you have a big vision, let's say like a product North Star that is very ambitious, how would you go about actually implementing that? And whose responsibility would that be to sort of break it up into parts, into phases?
I mean, I definitely think it shouldn't be like, I think it's got to be everyone. I hope that doesn't, like, I think it's got to be a North Star that is not the design North Star. It's like, we all want to get to this thing. Like, we will all agree this is the direction we want to go. Something that I feel like in things like North Star that I've realized took me a little while to understand is there's actually this book that's more of a business book. It's called How to Pitch Anything.
Mhm.
And I strongly recommend it. There's something about just the psychology. Like, I have this little poster I keep looking up at in the corner that I look at there's this notion of our lizard brain inside. Like, even if people are rational, like, we quickly reject things, we go away. And I think there's this subconscious fear of new things, or scary if I don't know how to do it. And I think it's this weird difficulty that people have with something that's daunting and saying that's an important thing that I think we as designers or the people who are showing new things, then we're like the threat that the subconscious is just, even if they don't really want to the fight against, right? Like, for whatever reason. I mean, just imagine an engineer thinking, God, how am I going to do this thing? Or like, I don't understand how we get there. So I think you do want to have a North Star. I think you got to have like a safety, like, you got to figure out how to remove the risk so people can do it and don't get screwed for if they can't do it perfect instantly. So remove the risk. I think part of that is, let's say, the breaking it up, or what are incremental steps to get there, or there's something between North Star and min viable. Like, what's a min viable you think can do to start getting that's valuable? I hate when people do min viable that are so stripped down that they're not a good product. Like, that's not enough. But I guess the number one thing is that it's like, truly, it's everyone's North Star, not the design North Star.
Yeah.
Even if it starts as a design suggestion, it's like everyone's got to be on board that's where we need to get to. And then I think that's part of that, like, organizational safety and trust. Like, to me, that's maybe I'm old school. I feel like you don't get that in a company where someone's just cramming and pressure. Like, you've got to have some psychological safety, and then we work together. We're figuring out how to do this, instead of, if we don't instantly have this perfect in a quarter, you suck. And then guess what? No one's going to want to take any risks or do anything. They're going to. So I think, wow, the sun all came out all of a sudden. That's getting me.
Yeah, the way I think about a North Star, like a product North Star, is as an opportunity to spark a discussion, just spark conversations. And I like to say that, like, look, we are working on a North Star. It may be one of North Stars. Like, let's explore different versions of the potential future. Through the design methodologies, we can capture that potential vision relatively quickly, like quicker than at least it used to be possible. Maybe now with AI, it's going to be easy, but still. And so then we can have those discussions with executives, with engineering, with product, with domain experts about like, well, does this make sense or that makes sense?
Yeah,
And then I look at it as a way to align people behind the common
totally.
vision. And it doesn't
Totally.
mean that it needs to be implemented
Yeah.
exactly
Okay.
in that
Well,
way.
I like that.
Yeah.
See, it's funny. I think I like that as North Star of it's like a concept direction.
Yeah.
And I think I like what I like the most about what you're saying. I think it's the same with actually the one page. The idea is the discussion. I really like that I think you're right. That's the most important thing. And not just discussing the abstract, the framework of what is good about this? What do we like? What comes out of this? If there's a piece of it that we're actually going to do right away, right? Or what is good about this thing? So when we do a next iteration, we figure out that, or what's scary about it. I mean, I think that's really powerful.
What would be your advice to designers going in there and pitching their design concept to like high executive level? What should they be mindful of, and what's the recipe to maximize the chance of success?
Well, I mean, there's different contexts to everything. I think always be pre-selling. Like, I don't think it should be new. Just similar to what the lizard band should be almost more the wrap up of that. Like, I feel like you want to make sure people are exposed to it ahead of time.
Yeah.
One thing I really hate about most executive pitch and meetings is almost you've got like the peanut gallery of everyone else, and it's not even about your product; it's about them impressing the leaders, right? So, like I've been there presenting something to like Larry Page or other leaders, and you've got like 20 other VPs, and they all are trying to impress or say their thing and it's not helpful. And so I get if you can somehow control it and not be in that situation, or at least pre-talk to many of those folks, I think that's really important. Another thing, one of my most successful, I really love storyboards.
Mhm.
So I love to not show UI. And I think Google for Kids, one of the most successful things to get that launch was a storyboard of a girl and her first phone and how it works and how it ties in. So it was literally just a story and a narrative about why we should do Google for Kids. And there was no interface. There was no UI or anything. I think it was about, you've got to have a good story and that everyone wants. But I think that was super helpful for that mission.
What is a way?
And I think and I think this is the same problem with the leader. I think we have to do better job of better relationships over time instead of one meeting. Hopefully they should already know your face. Hopefully you've talked to get before. Hopefully I feel like that then, and I'd rather not have the big meeting. There should be a lot of meetings along the way or a lot of exposure versus don't build it up to the one super moment.
So essentially like de-risking that presentation by kind of, as you called it, like pre-sale. Like what is it?
And you might change the idea. You'll learn something from each of those, right? You might adjust to or even have an argument about the things people are scared of, or that sort of thing.
What is a way to like pre-sell to executive team? Like how do you, like if you don't,
you meet with every single one of them, hopefully one-on-one. It's a lot of work.
I mean, it is hard to get sometimes, depending on the structure of the company. Like to meet with the C-level, like with the CEO, it can be hard to arrange.
Yeah. I mean, I think you build that over time too. Like if you've done it, if you've had hits or the more rapport you have, the easier that is. Like, I think that's what worked with Google. The AI researchers didn't even want to talk to us when we first started. But once we had a couple they're like, oh, wow, look what they did for that team. Then they wanted to work with us with our method. So I think it's the same thing. Like you want to make everybody a hero, right? If they're with you, it's going to be, and if you solve their problems, right, and deal with their issues, you can make them successful. I don't believe, or maybe it sounds too Star Trek, but like that, there's no-win scenario like Captain Kirk would say. I really believe that you can make win-wins. I hate when people think of things as like a zero sum where someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. I think that's what we're good at as designers, is figuring out how to put things together and make something that's better than the sum of its parts,
Let's talk a bit about your recent experience. You worked with our government. And I think it's an interesting maybe like shift from how we just talked about innovation and how to make that happen. And kind of how someone with your experience, like you worked at Google, at Meta, like you really know deeply what it's like to run, world-class design and innovation teams. And then you ended up working with the government. I'm curious, like, how did it even happen? And how did it feel? Like the first, like your first, I don't know, weeks or something, like what did it feel like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I joined the U.S. Digital Service, which is a organization that Obama really started 2014 after like healthcare.gov was in trouble. They were trying to build it and the government wasn't good at software and it almost didn't work. And basically out of that realized that you needed to start this group, get more tech savviness and capability into government. Um, and so this was in the office of the president. It definitely was like a left turn for me, but I think I had taken, this is post pandemic. I had taken a little time. It was kind of when I really started looking into this is really before kind of AI really ramped up. And when I had initially applied and I really wanted to do something a little more mission driven. I was like, God, I'm attracted to things that are different than what I've done. And I felt like the government certainly needs work. I'm always frustrated with organization and wanting things to work better. And I really liked the way that was set up and helping in that area. I was a little tired of working in corporations and doing that. So I thought I would give that a try. It definitely was a shock. I mean, I definitely feel like I went back 10 years, technology and government is dated. I'm surprised how DC centric everything is, even though we have distributed teams. There's definitely like in US digital services, a really talented group of people, amazing skills. And like the interview process is probably one of the most difficult I ever had for a design interview. That's one of the appeals, to be honest, to me, that it was like, I've been a lot of interviewing and I was just really quite impressed with the rigor. So I joined and we act as very senior consultants. Everyone's essentially an individual contributor. We move into different government agencies to help build out their system. I had worked in the IRS for most of my time, as well as I spent some time with the Department of Justice and immigration systems, helping people trying to get their citizenship through going to the court system, making that more efficient. I guess it's really hard what I learned is it's really hard to hire tech people in government for a ton of reasons. So there definitely needs to be more of that.
Why is it hard?
Well, I definitely took a pay cut to do it. There's a very rigorous set of numbers, and even to go in, it's on one of the higher ranking or levels to get something that's easy, even potentially like comparable and to salaries out in industry. And there's just so many constraints in a lot of ways. Like everything is a little bit harder. We had to fight to get Figma in. Like I was proud of one of the things. I mean, I think they were on the way, but I was like, first day in, I'm like, we're definitely going to make sure we're using Figma and we can get that through the system and get a government approval. I mean, if we had all data going, there's a lot of systematic problems with building that out. And I was really excited to try that. It was like, so the program also is like it was like 250 people on the team. And it's like a 2-year tour. You do it for a 2-year tour of duty and potentially another 2-year. And it really was a program that a lot of people then move into the agencies that they had worked with. And that's kind of a really good way, kind of pull more tech talent into government. And maybe I wish it would have worked a little faster. And so even when Trump was elected, I definitely was wondering what that was going to be like, what the changes. But I think some people left, right? But we are a non-political organization. Like we're here to help and serve the public, right? And I was like, well, there's so many things we can do that are not even political, like efficiency. Everybody can get behind that and want to do that. But then when Elon came in, they basically just took over our organization in the sense they didn't literally even talk to anyone on the team. They kind of pushed us up to the side, didn't even work with us. And that was just quite frustrating. I just made the hard choice as of end of February, I left and decided that I both can't have an impact.
I'm curious to tap into the challenges and complexities of working within like large bureaucratic organizations. Like government obviously is one of them. Like I also have experience working in healthcare, which is also regulated, and you have experience working in healthcare. And I think in our chat, previously you mentioned that like healthcare is actually not that complicated in comparison to the government. What are the inherent challenges working in the environment, in a bureaucratic environment? Why is it so hard to create, experience that we all know can be created, right? Like we're all familiar with good digital tools, yet in certain industries, the more regulated it is, like the harder it is to have those good experiences. Like, what is your take on that?
Yeah, the government is like such another beat. Like I do feel like it is very behind. Like there is a lot of efficiency to have. So I feel like it's almost like it, and it's almost a little unique. So I feel like it's better for us to stick in tech and medical as we talk about this, because it's a little
Yeah.
closer to the, it's at least in the same ballpark. But just let's talk about medical. I think what dawned on me is FDA approval and healthcare, and like when taking care of, there's just this general level of cautiousness to all of the work, because when people's lives are on the line, I feel like that kind of spills down to every bit of work. And I think one of the ways to make it faster is to split the things that are about life and the things where you can move fast and break things and not kill people. I feel like you've kind of got to break people out of that risk aversion mentality, right? It's kind of infectious from the medical state, and what can we do to split apart from that? Like some things, there's some examples when you can, instead of going for medical certification on devices, you can do things that are, aren't for medical use. So you can move a lot faster and try things early and work them out before moving to a device. So I try to split up the parts where, we've got to be really cautious and where we can spend time. In tech companies, a lot of the tech is more modern, and so people like processes, and it's like that culture and that DNA, like knowing how to build things quicker. Like just like that idea when we talked about, we were talking about design, and I was saying, well, you want to be able to build your designs faster. I think that there's not as much of that capability in the companies.
And is
right?
it
It's
because
amazing how much money.
is it because there is a lack of talent, or for some other reasons?
I think it's partly I think when folks have less understanding of design and product and and even software engineering, so maybe they haven't quite amped up the teams caliber wise, is maybe a piece of it, right? There's they haven't built out the same level of team, some kind, but that can't be the whole thing, because there's plenty of great people. Like I hope I don't want to sound like I'm knocking engineers that are working in medical companies. Well, it's the same thing with why are cars always so far behind with their tech? Right.
Well,
it's the cycle, right? So it's like it's timelines, right? I think that I think that's a big piece of it, right? Of iteration time.
Ironically, I was just talking with my friend yesterday. He used to work at Mercedes, and yeah, he said that basically it's like a 10-year approximately cycle. Like right
Isn't
now,
that crazy?
automotive company works like on a car that is going to be in 10 years just because of the time it takes. So does it mean that anything that is, and I think another reason is, like, for example, in automotive, they have like contracts with manufacturers. Let's say like you make a contract to supply like this radio, or this particular part, and the contract would be signed for like a long time.
Any physical product is a different, no matter what, is a different scale. But like phones are a lot, some electronic products are a lot faster. But so maybe we should push I almost feel like we should push hardware products out, because that's a little because there is a hardware piece. But even in medical software, it's still slower and takes time. I think it is something about I think something about the culture. They don't move in quick enough cycles on launches. They're just not forced to because of the way it's released.
Is there a way to like, how would you approach fixing this, working within a regulated environment, say health tech, or let's say software? Where would you start to make it to improve the baseline quality of the products?
I mean, there's so many inefficiencies in medical in the way. I think it's not a priority. I think it's similar in enterprise software for 100 years, or 100, not for many years, didn't look like crap. They didn't even try to make good interfaces until they really needed to, until there was more competition, until that. So
Hmm.
I think it's about incentives. There's really no motivation to put effort on it. Nobody does it, right? And so there's just not enough push for it, and not enough business need, um, or some we haven't like proven the value of it for that to happen. So I feel like it's like just there's so many other things that just isn't a priority. They should be
And
hiring bigger teams. Yeah, be more, iterate more often. A lot of those things.
my experience is that when, like, one of the reasons at least is it's not obvious to understand regulatory requirements. Like, they're not that straight to begin with. And obviously, when if you take engineers or designers, like, most people have no idea like what those requirements are. Like, I remember, sitting there one day and actually reading through like 70 pages of FDA guidelines
Yeah,
and like uh, human-centric design. And the irony is that it's not that clear still. Like, you can read all of
yeah,
that and you try to have an answer to some basic questions, and it's like, it's not there. And so, but then you, on one hand, and then you rely on essentially the regulatory team, that is, that's your kind of gatekeeper to some extent, right? Like, this is okay, this is not okay now. And so it's like it's hard to know what is acceptable. It takes time to get an answer on whether something may or may not work. And it's almost like, as you go through this experience, it takes such an incredible amount of
yeah,
um, perseverance to want to change something, that I feel
yeah,
like for a lot of people, there's just like not enough of impatience to do it. You're like, by the time you just get something through the door, you're like,
yeah. That takes
whatever,
a lot
that's
more
good.
time. I mean, I think
That's
you've
good.
answered,
That's
yeah,
good. And yeah,
because it's
yeah,
more complicated. I definitely agree that needs design, right? Like, I definitely feel like no one's hiring. I mean, they're not hiring anyone in the FDA. They're cutting people, but they should be designing those documents better, right? Those requirements should be done better. Like, I mean, I feel like I think I do think that's a piece, but I do think it's like the trials. Like, no matter what, you've got to do trials and tests when people's lives or health are on the
yeah,
line. It reminds me, I was just like, separate for kids under 14 is similar. Like, it's not the requirement, the legal requirements, and the amount of time I spent with a lawyer for Google for Kids was a lot. Like, making sure
and
you have consent and everything works. And those people, like you said, both for improve your people interpreting the FDA guideline and the lawyer, like, everyone's risk averse. This is very like,
yeah,
they're over in. They should be giving recommendations, not stopping things from happening, right? And some other business leader decisions should be making the decision on the right amount of risk to take. It drives me nuts because a lawyer has no incentive to let something through if there's the slightest amount of risk, and it just makes everything harder and things get worse, right? Sometimes it's ridiculous.
yeah. And that's a bit of a sad thing about that. Some of these industries, they're very important. Like healthcare, government. Well, it's not an industry, but as an entity, um, automotive. Like, I mean, I would argue that automotive industry is doing okay. I mean, there is definitely some good cars out there, at
Yeah.
least, right? Like, um,
Well, yeah.
I
Could be
mean,
more.
probably, yeah, yeah. I guess that's another interesting
I
thing
mean, there's
is,
not enough competition. I feel like this is the other problem I have with just companies, less companies, even a few. Like, if we had more, there would be more of this. Smaller companies are easier to move faster. Like, if we had more competition, it might be a tad less efficient for each company, but I feel like we'd have more innovation, more of these things happening. So I really wish we had rules to split up and have more smaller companies. But I think what ends up happening in this kind of world we have these giant companies aggregating everything. And we have these ventures that start, but most of them just get sucked up by the big companies. So I feel like having more smaller companies and more competition would definitely give companies incentive to be more innovative. We'd give companies incentive um, to do more, to move faster.
Yeah, where I was going with also previous statement is that like for the new generation of engineers and designers, people who work on products who are just starting to learn the craft, when they make choices about where to go and where to apply themselves, right? Like you're faced with choices or like, well, you could go and work at one of the, top companies, make something super exciting, something that everybody knows, make a lot of money, or, go into this like difficult industry where it's hard to make
Yeah,
things happen. Things are not as polished. You may be and
totally.
making
No, it's
less
frustrating.
money, right? And it's like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
an
the big
easy
companies,
choice.
I
Yeah,
mean, the big
yeah,
companies suck a lot of talent and waste, like essentially. So right because of that, you can't blame a person for that incentive to wanting to go to a big
yeah.
company.
It makes sense.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, but that's the effect of that. It's
What's your take on 20 years or so ago? There was a lot of independent consulting shops, like design and development boutiques. And then there was a trend to start building in house design teams. Like I remember the time when it was actually very rare for a company to have an inside design team. Like, and then all of a sudden, like they started to hire more and more. They started to acquire smaller agencies. And I think the last, I don't know, at least 10, probably a little more than 10 years, it's been like everybody is inside of big companies and fewer independent boutiques that do great work, or at least maybe that's my perception, but that's kind of what it feels like.
I mean, that might even be
Um,
an economy thing. I mean, it's hard to say if that's negative or positive. I feel like, well, first companies didn't know they even needed in-house design, right? So you hire a consultant for a little while and then you're done. And I think
yeah.
there is a positive that they know they need an ongoing team. So that does cut out some of the independence. I always liked in-house more because I liked following something along instead of when I was a consultant and hand it off and then they mess it up or don't follow along.
Mhm.
And being tighter with a team and really understanding over time uh, has an appeal. I think you can really have a longer term influence in a way on things.
Mhm.
I don't know if the less design consulting is more of the economics of the last few years, because a little bit of the shine is worn off the big companies, and there are there's been a tightening of the market and layoffs, so there's just less um less work for agencies.
From the perspective of craft and learning craft, for somebody early in their career, would you recommend starting in-house
Yeah,
at a company or starting at an agency?
yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I've been asked. I have a lot of young early designer when I talk, and I've been asked that a few times. And I think you will learn so much more about design and design skills in a consulting for or a business than you ever. I think in big companies you don't learn that much. Like if it, uh, and a smaller company, maybe not the same, but I think in a consultant where it's just a different pace. That you're going to build your design skills a lot more. There's going to be a lot more happening. I think, especially in the larger companies, I actually think was one of the reasons I wanted to move out for a while and needed a raise. I did feel like you learned more bureaucracy. You learn more to deal with red tape than you do design work. And I think, how are you going to get better at design is doing design work. If you want to get better at like climbing the ladder to a big company, work into, if that's the main goal of a big company. But I think you'll grow faster and build more in the design agency. You probably get paid less, but I feel like that it would be, as I really think about it, I think it would be a smarter start, a smarter jump start, and then move after you've really, you know, um, really honed your craft. I think that would make a lot of sense. And then you can get kind of a little more of the business experience or understanding it, working with teams. I actually feel a lot of designers that were all big company didn't learn as much. So like they start right in on a single style guide, right? A single company style. And that could be all they know. Um, Especially if you're working on the same product all the time. I mean, at a minimum, move around teams in the company.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing that uh, in my conversations and thinking about it, there seems to be this kind of pattern that I'm observing that uh, to learn craft, consulting, like working in an agency, does seem to be a pretty reasonable and good thing because you have a lot of exposure to different projects, but also you have a strong system of like mentorship and other folks that you can tap into the knowledge, and somebody can guide you. There is a lot more, kind of, it's a diverse, let's say, design team that can exchange feedback. uh, on the other side, within in-house, you have kind of less variety of maybe work. It's more of the same, it's more narrow. But it sounds like, and correct me if I get it wrong, but you as well say that creating impact in-house may be easier than from the consulting side. So it's kind of like this thing where
Yeah,
you get to
possibly.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, more involvement long term. I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. I feel like I think there's also like, I feel like it's product work in consulting is not also as frequent. I feel like the marketing work is more the same, right? Like you're building a website and a brand, and that's going to be all visual. You're not, um, but if you're working in places doing UI, soft interaction, I do feel like there is a little more diversity of projects and work coming in. And I think you're right that you'll be on a product that has more scale. You'll follow it further along. I think in consulting, you won't go as deep on a product. You won't learn the mistakes you made when you hand it over to the design that the internal folks have to deal with to finally launch it. You won't get as much user feedback. You're not as much a part of the team, and you won't work with in-house. You'll learn working with engineers and other folks. Now, what would be the ideal would be a consulting firm where you're doing the whole product, right? So you have the engineers. So I think if you're a design and you're monoculture, I think there will be a gap there, right? In that understanding, in that working with, other folks, and there will be a bias even a little bit.
For designers in particular who want to be up to date with understanding what's going on, what are some of the key parameters, or like what should they be mindful of when looking at the industry? Like you said, for example, you're very excited about some of the innovation and technology. Like what are those kind of key things and attributes? Like, I mean, generative AI, I guess it's a big thing. Um, are there kind of keywords to sort of be aware of for the designer in
Yeah,
particular?
that's a good. I don't know if there are keywords. I think. I think the. I think. Yeah. I think you've got to try the different tools and try to really use them versus do a demo with them. I think I've been very disappointed. So every tool I try, or the majority, it's like it's got a neat concept. It's kind of good, but like it really isn't there to really do work, and they like you get into it pretty quick. So I think I'm kind of a good, I'd like to find a way to kind of come back if they evolve or give feedback on them, but I'm having trouble finding tools that are like concretely good for actually doing real design work.
Yeah.
I'd literally ask someone
this
this question to a company that I'm going to be doing working for, that is the AI company, and asking them if their design team is doing anything along these lines. And they're like, no, we're not using AI or stuff. I think there will be some basic general efficient tool. I think the LLMs for writing and document like that, it's a good help, but I don't have good advice there right now, to be honest. On right.
Yeah.
I think it's a wild west and it's more general. And I think don't just read the hype, go in and like try things out a little bit, play around with them.
Yeah, I've been I need to carve out some time to sit and actually try to,
Yeah.
maybe I'll record something, I don't know, like with like, here's this tool, here's that tool here, like almost trying to do maybe a similar thing across different tools to really understand. Because I agree with you. It's the practicality is questionable, although I do see a lot of people talking about how amazing things are. Like, for example, I don't know, Lovable is a tool. I don't know if you looked into, have you looked into
Lovable?
Yeah, Lovable. Yeah, it's one of the fastest growing startups now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like AI prompt based tool where you can literally like make a clone of not website, or like you just basically human input prompt, and it creates an output, and then you can, through prompts, and it gives you some some precision, like some control. Like you can, I think, select an object and like make some changes specifically to that object. And they rolled out Figma plugin that's supposed to give you more direct flexibility. So that's one very popular. And on their website, they have like a section that shows startups that were built exclusively on that.
Yeah.
So apparently it's possible to build things. Then another one, I met with the founder, actually, with a co-founder recently, called Subframe. And Subframe, it's similar idea, but it's built more for designers. Like you can prompt, and then you can, it gives you more precision control. Like you can click on an element, change it, or you can click on an element and write another prompt and say like, well, change the checkbox into radio button.
Yeah.
So there is definitely, like, because even 3 months ago, I felt like it was not, these companies almost were not around, or maybe they were not.
It's going to accelerate. I mean, I outsource a lot of this. So, well, for number one, I'm probably not the best person to help designers with design tools, because I'm more interested in designing tools that are AI versus me using it as, I mean, I'm not against using it, but this hasn't been my focus to find a tool to do the design work, because I do think there's going to be less UI work in general. It's going to be workflow, and there's a lot of other things. So, so I've been a lot of the research I do is more about the AI itself, not design tool AI. I've done a lot less, but I definitely think Figma is going to do, I think I'd like to, I'm definitely curious to check those out. But I have people for different things. Like I've got a designer I go to that's doing it for user research, and he's obsessed with making user research more efficient, using AI tools to write out, personas, even make the persona. Like he knows enough about the tech to make a persona so he can talk to it, I don't know. And so he's building out that stuff. So he's my guy to go to for that, because there's too much in there. And then when I want to do mocks, I've got another guy for that.
I saw just yesterday, I forgot the name, but so it's a UX research startup, AI driven. It's actually conducting, like AI is actually conducting the interviews. I don't know how it works exactly, but
that makes sense. I can see how that would work.
You set it up as an agent, and it just goes out and talks to.
I mean, agentic and ages. I mean, it's a Haiti word, but and this is, to me, that other step we talked about beyond LLMs. Instead of it just chatting with you, it goes and does stuff, right? It helps. It can have agency, but definitely. So I think as more and more of those tools do that, we're going to have a lot more of those applications.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on.
I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Where can, if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
Oh, let's see. My calling card website, just dahley.com. My name's spelled a little funny, DAHLEY.com is a good place. I'm on LinkedIn, and get a hold of me through either of those pretty easily.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Great talking with you. Take care.